Greetings, YouTube. So I asked a friend of mine a question recently. I said, if you could improve the human species, what would you do? And he threw up some ideas of genetically engineering better sensors, it's taking senses from the animal kingdom and expanding our hearing and our sight and things. But in retrospect, he said maybe he wouldn't change anything because he was afraid of the effects down the line. If we change the genome, what happens? We change the gene line, what happens? Germ line, I should say, what happens to the species? And I thought about what he said, and I don't think I really made myself clear. Because I think what I was trying to ask, I didn't articulate it well, was if you could redesign hominids, what would you do? Not just make humans better, but if you're going to take the basic form, upright walker, head on top, legs on the bottom, arms in between, what would you do? And that's a much more radical proposition than just how to improve the human model we have now. That's been done numerous times in games, and I happen to love transhuman fiction or say game settings. Biotech in GURPS is a wonderful source for that kind of thing about redesigning people. I love the idea of anthropomorphic creatures. I love the idea put forth for modifications of people into cyborgs, into biologically hacked creatures that are well reflected in numerous cyberpunk-style games, and the Mutant Epoch is a great example of how to do that, with mutations and things like that. One of the things I loved about the 4th edition Game World, the 1992 edition, it really, to me, hit that kind of sweet spot for me. But those are all modifying what we have. If you were going to redesign it from the ground up, what would you do? Now, one of the caveats is you have to still be able to use human technology. So we're designing something that's going to have to fit into the human world to some degree or other. And we're assuming that we're in a transhuman era. So it's very likely that there will be many other weird creatures walking around. So these beings that we're discussing would not be completely ostracized. If they were the only things in the entire world, they're going to stand out like sore thumbs. So what would I do? One of the first things I would do is put the spine down the center of the body cavity. Not against the back, which is an artifact of the fact that we used to be quadrupeds at one time in the past. It gives us lots of back problems now as in the present. But I'd put it down the center. I'd make it a little more robust, but balance that against flexibility. I don't want to lose too much flexibility. I'd like to have as much flexibility as humans do. I would have the rib cage be all-encompassing. It would go all the way around, maybe attaching with ribs attaching at different vertebrae. So you would have ribs that some ribs are attached to the front, some are attached to the back. So you're moving like this, and the ribs are kind of free floating at different points that they connect to the spine. I would have the arms would be centered as opposed to where ours are set to the back. They would be centered along with the spine over the core of the torso. I would have 2 legs. Feet probably much more simian-like, so that would want to be able to actually have gripping capacity through the feet, which would give them a bit greater utility in free fall. Not to mention climbing here on under a gravity in a gravity well. I haven't decided if I'd want to go with 2 arms or 4 arms. With 2 arms being slightly longer and stronger than ours, somewhat gorilla-like, or not quite gorilla, probably more orangutan-like, and then 2 smaller, lighter arms that are designed for dexterity and fine motor skill. The larger of the 2 would have only have 3 digits. It wouldn't have a pinky and a thumb. Though I was actually considering going with 2 digits and 2 opposing thumbs, and the lower hands would have 2 opposing thumbs and 3 digits. So you'd have 5 digits on the lower hands. The upper ones wouldn't need it because they're more for brute strength and grip and things like that. So you don't need quite the delicacy you would need for fine motor skill with 5 digits. I would probably try to get more ball socket joints in the body so that you have a bit more rotation range per chance, but again, balance that off against not really wanting to losing too much strength. But some of the other great apes have a greater rotation ranges than we do, so it is probably very possible that it could be doable. Now, sensors in the head, since I want to be able to use human equipment, having everything geared forward is probably a good thing, but I think I might want to go with 4 eyes. 2, where we have the ear, and then 2 a little further out to give more of the prey vision that you have in like deer and things like that. So you still have the central vision of a predator, but you'd have a greater range. I also might want to have slightly different wavelength receptors in those 2 sets of eyes, allowing a greater range of wavelengths that you could pick up. We have in nature already, we have creatures that see into the infrared, into the ultraviolet, so I think that splicing those into the genes would be useful. I'd probably increase the olfactory sense, though humans' olfactory senses are quite good, and there was some researcher who actually trained himself to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division by scent alone. So that's quite fascinating. But probably want to increase that. Taste, I don't know if taste needs to be changed or not. I think taste is pretty good. You may want to maybe throw in the ability to pick up some certain kinds of heavy metals per chance, so that you can avoid some kinds of poisoning. Hearing, you're going to want to have that be superior to what we have, increase the range, but also allow the ability to block out sound. So you voluntarily close off the ears, much the way we can blink when we want to and close our eyes. We need to block out light. Probably have a nictitating membrane like the Vulcans have in Star Trek for underwater use and for protection of the eyes. Maybe have one of them being built, the clear one having some polarization to help cut down glare under bright circumstances. I'd probably going to go with very little hair or none, because it just, to my mind, it gets in the way. Take my word for it. I've had hair. I've had not hair. This is much easier. But if people like hair, we could probably have the full range of human capacity for hair if you want. You might want slightly larger, stronger jaw muscles in case you actually have to use your jaws as to process a wider range of foods, or potentially use it as a bite. So you may have a slightly larger skull ridge, which will allow larger muscle connections in there to allow a greater deal of strength here. That's why some of the great apes have a slight ridge in their here is for muscle attachments, that they have larger jaw capacities. So these are the kind of things I'm talking about. Really significantly redesigning the hominid form into something completely new. I would also make sure that the genitals were hidden behind a bony plate, or at least heavily muscled plate that would then move aside or split open or something to allow the genitals to come out, because having genitals exposed is a horrible, horrible idea. Male testicles hanging on the outside of the body to cool them is what evolution had to do, because it's all it had to work with. We can do better than that. I played with the idea of making them true hermaphrodites. I'm not sure if I would want that or not. I haven't decided yet. That's a really difficult choice to make, and it's almost like I wouldn't want to make that decision for someone else. You know, I mean, a lot of the things in the body I'm okay with, but when it comes to people's genitals, they take that very personally, pun intended. So I'm not sure how I would handle that. But at least I'd put it on the table. Let's put it that way. We're going to have, since we're mammals, we're going to have to still have lactating breasts, because for providing food for infants. I may well keep nipples for males. Many males enjoy nipple play. I just will not take that away from them. So I think these are some of the general ideas of things I would do to radically change the hominid form to make them more robust, more well designed, longer lasting, less prone to the lifelong injuries that we experience as we age. And as someone who's 50, I can tell you, as you get older, you get some of these aches and pains, and some of the things I'm discussing would avoid that. Again, having the spine in the back of the body is a bad design. Well, it's not a design. It's what evolution had to work with, so it's what they work with. So tell me, thinking along these lines, you got to use human technology, and we're going to probably want to keep mammalians and keep us mammalian within those parameters. What would you do to radically redesign the hominid form?